Stacy, just so you know, I'm still here, but I'm just going live. Stacy?
I'm here.
Okay, love, how are you?
I'm good. How you
Good.
doing?
I'm good. Hey, everybody, it's your girl, Tawana B, with Not Your Normal Conversation. And I'm sitting here with Stacey Borden. Stacey, how are you?
I'm fabulous. How you doing? I'm
I'm,
glad to be here.
I'm glad that you're here, honestly. It's good to finally get you on the show. I've been trying for the last couple of months. You're a busy lady.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I'm
Pretty
so,
busy.
yes,
I'm good. How you doing?
so Stacey, for all the people that don't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself for us?
So I am Stacey Borden.
How you
A
doing?
formerly incarcerated woman. I think I have an echo going on, Tawana. Can you hear that?
Yes, I can. So let me take care of that for you really quick.
Okay.
So,
Yes. Pretty busy. I'm good. How you doing?
you still have that echo, Stacy?
I could hear the recording back. It's like it's playing back.
Okay, so are you good
Okay,
now?
now that's better. That didn't come back.
Okay, perfect. So now we can get to it. Stacy, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, just in case they don't know who you are?
So I am Stacey Borden. I'm from Roxbury, Dorchester area. I come from the Orchard Park Project area, and then up to Humboldt Ave area for a greater part of all my life, 59 years. I'm
Oh,
from Boston.
wow. Well, you look great
Yeah.
for 59 years, so I wouldn't
Well,
tell you
thank
that.
you.
You're welcome. So why don't you
So, um,
no, go ahead.
So I am formerly incarcerated. I am the founder and executive director of New Beginners Reentry Services
Mm-hmm.
and a proud member of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, board member for both organizations, Owl Production Company and Families for Justice's Healing. And
Oh,
so all of that just means that we are abolitionists and we are the whole focus is to end incarceration of women and girls. And my part that I play in it as a licensed clinician,
mm-hmm.
I have a double major of trauma and addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And our focus is, we always say, Andrea James and them, you get them out. You get the girls out, and
Right.
our job is to keep them out through Kimia's house, through services that we provide with resources coming back into the community that we've been really building up in the community.
Right.
From the past 40, 50 years, we haven't had any resources, especially people who come out of prison. And
Right.
so that's who I am. That's part of the work that we do. Um, Through COVID, it's been really challenging and busy. Our people are suffering in those cages, and doubly, the prison isn't releasing anybody out.
Right.
So we've had a fight, and we've been doubly busy this past 9, 10 months.
Right. And I know that for a fact, and I know that to be true. So why don't we just get right in it? So your past, things that happened to you, define the woman that you are today. So So can you tell us what's the one thing in your past that pushed you to be active in the community the way you are today?
Well, a lot of us, not just me, around the country, women have suffered, domestic violence, past sexual trauma, sexual abuse,
Right,
um, property damage, meaning, busting boyfriend's car windows and all kind of just stupid shit, right?
right,
And we get punished for that. Some of us went into some of the trauma that led us into numbing ourselves with, drugs and alcohol. And that progressed into a form of addiction and alcoholism.
right,
And then you have to kind of feed that addiction. So it brought us into the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system with no alternatives to sentencing as they created this punitive racist system.
right.
This system is the infrastructure of oppression, right? And so
Absolutely.
they're getting thousands and millions or hundreds and thousands, I'm going to say it again, millions of dollars.
Absolutely.
No matter how you say it, they're getting a lot of money off the backs of us
Right.
in them cages. And
Absolutely.
so, coming through the community, I'm a member of 12 siblings. My mom and dad was married 65 years. It
Wow.
wasn't it wasn't easy from them migrating from Nubian Square, Dudley Station area, OP area. I went to school in Orchard Park, Dearborn School, Albert Palmer.
Right.
Wasn't easy trying to raise 12 children and stay together,
Right.
especially with my dad. He had some alcoholism issues in his life who turned his self around.
Right.
And so, dysfunction happens, dysfunction of family, dysfunction of community, trauma sets in, and I just couldn't function.
Right.
I started numbing myself very early at probably at age 12 or 13, starting with cigarettes and weed. And then cocaine has always been my friend. I've built a relationship with cocaine. And I didn't know how to break that cycle. And that just was, a cycle and repetitive of the prison system opening up that door. It was just that revolving door going in and out. And, I thought that I was safer in prison than out here. And so, once you become a victim, once you become a victim of that traumatic experience of rape,
Right.
I've had my battles with fighting and being shot and stabbed and all that stuff growing up, and you just don't know how to navigate.
Right.
And so that has been my experience that led me into the prison. And then once I, came into, I say, a maturated state,
Right.
at 49, it took me longer, girl, than other people. But
I know the feeling.
I didn't get it until I was 49. And the women back there in the prison really kind of raised me. And the women that I'm talking about is really, Angie Jefferson. Shout out to my girl Angie, who's still suffering in them, cages.
Yes.
Kimia Faust, Julie Pike, Lynn Sullivan, them sisters there kind of was like woke me up and really supported me and got busy with me with
Right.
group therapy
Right.
and just like knocked me upside my head a couple of times and say, stop coming through here.
Right.
You can do something better with yourself.
Right.
Some of us can never come home. And
Right.
that kind of just hit me. I'm like, you all will never come home?
Right.
Falling in love with my sisters back there. I'm like, I can't even process no shit like that because of the way that system.
Right.
You
Right.
know, we have this motto that we say nothing about us without us. They cannot keep being at these tables to
Right.
talk about what they should do with us without us. Because until you experience being in them type of atmospheres and that culture,
Yes.
you can't talk about it. You
You
can't
can't
keep
talk
saying
about
why are we talking about ending incarceration of women and girls.
Right. Right.
If you
So
look at all the data that's out there,
right. Right.
especially in the federal system, women are being sexually abused and human trafficked and all kind of shit.
Right.
Breaking their backs and paralyzing them because they don't want to cooperate with the way that these male dominating, gods are
Right.
handling us.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
Right.
unacceptable, and we're saying enough is enough, and it has to stop.
Right. So I have a question for you because you've come through the prison system, in and out, MCI, Framingham, and all of those different systems. And
Yeah.
then you finally got to a point where you said to yourself, enough is enough. But I'm sure that, your family, as well as people that knew you in the community, probably never thought that you would stop or that this would end. That either you would stay in jail and just be in jail for the rest of your life, or that you would end up dead. But you decided to do something different. And not only did you come out swinging, you came out with an agenda that was so strong, but people couldn't help but to stop and look at you and say, I want to be like her when I grow up, because I was one of those people. So I want to speak to you about that. And I want to ask you if you think that your past incarceration played a major role in the changes that you're trying to make within the justice system and within your own community.
Well, let me just say, this isn't a me. This isn't me doing anything,
Right.
right? This is all universal, all spiritual. These are my sisters. There's thousands of us that are in the movement with the National Council. We have formerly incarcerated sisters all over the world that teach us
Right.
on how to be community activists.
Right.
But it started in the prison. Now, this isn't saying uh, for anybody who's listening to go into the prison system to get it. This is saying that we can do what we're doing. Come with us.
Right.
Look us up. The National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls,
Right.
Families for Justice as Healing, and New Beginners Reentry Services. We're right there on Warren Street, 100R Warren Street, across from the Boys Club. Of course, we're on Zoom, but check out some of our websites and connect with us, because this is important work. We started in the prison, but in Framingham State Prison,
Right.
they don't give us the same rights that the males have, and they're both MCI, Massachusetts Correctional Institute, right?
Yep.
So of course we know that society looks at women as a lesser value. Like we're supposed to be domesticated women, take care of men, blah blah blah. We're not supposed to, there's no equal,
Right.
nothing. So we know all that. We also know the disproportionate of sentencing between black women and white women, women and men. If we keep talking about mass incarceration in the male form, then we're going to forget about how many sisters are being incarcerated at a mile a minute. We went up to 800% in the past 5 years
Yep.
being incarcerated. Recidivism in Massachusetts, all over the world, is high, right?
Yes.
It started in the prison when we just, got together and started running groups. And we're saying, we got to meet. We got to talk about, running into somebody like Kimya Faust, coming in my cell and hearing her story.
Right.
When you hear somebody's story like that and you're saying, my God, that happened to me too, but I'm not sitting in here being sentenced for manslaughter.
Right.
Right? So these women that I lived with, that I grew up with, that raised me, suffered greatly. They're survived and punished. What does that mean?
Right.
So Kimya Faust, who I advocate for all the time, whose story needs to be told,
Buddy of
came
mine.
in my cell in 2008, highly medicated.
Yes.
Now, coming from drug addiction, then you come into the prison system and you're highly medicated.
Right.
There's a problem there. She couldn't even stand up. She had all white uniform on, which indicated, shit, you must work in the kitchen somewhere,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so if that's so, how are you doing that in that type of condition? You're drooling, you can't keep your head up. What did they give you?
Right.
Bottom line is, what I'm saying is, Kimya, at 12 years old, coming from Dorchester, was violently raped.
Yep.
Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, back then when she was 12, prosecuted that gentleman. Now, for one, I'm an advocate for all people. For one, he should have gotten some type of help and support. I'm sure that wasn't his first time if he did what he did to her in a violent manner, right? So he should have gotten some help. But they just threw him away and threw the key away, right?
Yep.
They brought her in the system at 12 to get her to come into court to identify him. That did something to her brain. Not only was she violently raped, she had to face the accuser and deal with prosecutors who scared the shit out of her.
Absolutely.
That brought her into, defiance. She wasn't trying to cooperate with her parents. She wasn't trying to go to school. She wasn't trying to deal with anybody, make friends. She didn't know how. She couldn't process
Right.
that as a child.
Right.
She's not even an adolescent yet. She's a child.
Right.
So finally, she starts running away and doing what a child does, trying to deal with that trauma. Now, that's why we call it post traumatic stress disorder. It comes later. She didn't even know what she was dealing with.
Right.
That led Kimya into drug addiction. That drug addiction led her into just staying out in the street for years.
Yep.
Excuse me. At 29, she trusts another gentleman and they're smoking crack, and he hits her upside the head. He gives her some Clonopins to sedate her.
Yep.
She goes out for a minute. He hits her upside the head in an attempt to rape her. We know this because it's on the documents. It's in her transcripts. Her blood was on the 2x4. She picks up a butter knife in that room while they're smoking crack and stabs him. He hits her again. She stabs him again. And unfortunately, he dies.
Right.
She went down to Boston Commons in a state of shock, wandered around. They picked her up. She told the truth. They prosecuted her and tried to tell her if she didn't take a plea. Now, this is our system. This is how they treat our women.
Absolutely.
If you don't take a plea, you'll get first degree, and we're going to offer you a 19 to 20.
Yes.
That means 19 years, you can see parole, but you got one more year to go. And in that, if you don't do the right thing in that prison, you probably would have to do the whole 20.
Absolutely.
That other year kills you when you're in there. Like, when you're in your end. And we're saying that's kind of wrong. How do they do that to her? So that is to answer your question. It kind of really woke me up and said, man, how many of us are in here like that? Almost all of us.
Yep.
And so we had a problem with that. And the more that we try to rally around advocating for ourselves to do something different, we were hit with tickets, D reports, disciplinary action, taking us and putting us in the hole, which is CCU, closed custody unit, because they said we was inciting a riot when we're just trying to navigate our emotional state.
Right. So you speak a lot about defunding the police and
Yeah.
not building more prisons.
That's
But
right.
you've come out and you've done something, because I talked to you while I was on the inside. You're very resourceful, and you're very into helping people to transition from prison or jail to the community to make sure that they don't go back inside.
Yeah.
And you're very instrumental in that. So I'm going to say thank you for all of those who are not able to say it, and thank you for me. So,
Thank you.
the one thing that I hear you've done a lot of movements, and I saw you over the summertime at a function that Andrea James was having up Humboldt Ave there in the park. And we spoke and linked just about the things that you were doing. And you started New Beginnings. And then you went in to open up Kenya's house,
Yeah.
which just gave me the chills, because you open up these houses to say, hey, listen, I can't be a part of the problem anymore, but I'm going to be a part of the solution. And not only am I going to do this, but something else has to happen in order for these programs to be successful for these women. That means don't build any more prisons. If I have to open up more programs, then so be it. Don't give police more money to go out and arrest people for petty thefts and things that maybe they could, give them probation for. You're saying stop all of these things.
That's right.
You've spoken at Harvard. I have followed you all over just to hear your message, so to speak, because you have a powerful story. You have a powerful background, and there's a lot of people that respect you and love you. And you've done some great things as far as opening up New Beginnings and opening up Kenya's house and actually naming it after Kenya, who is
That's right.
just spoke about.
She
And
deserves it.
And absolutely. And I remember speaking to her on the inside, and we kind of talked about this. And I said, do you think Stacy's really going to name a program after you? She goes, watch, I bet you she'll do it. So I wrote to somebody just recently and said, hey, Stacey Borden named that program after Kenya. So everything that you've said that you were going to do, you've done it to be strong in the community, even when no one's standing with you.
That's right.
How do you feel about a a lot of people resisting what you're trying to do and saying that it's not going to work and that you can't save people who are coming out of jail and drug addicts if they don't want to be saved.
Well, let me just say this. So again, I don't do this alone. We work as a community, right? And no one can be saved unless they save themselves. We can assist them,
Right.
right? And so, let's talk about the root of all this.
Right.
For the past 40, 50, 100 years, let's jump to 100. Shit. The past decades, we haven't had any resources in the community as to why the prison system is growing, as to why the system, systemically, they believe we need more prisons.
Right.
It's only for our community. There's no other prisons outside of our communities, right? I mean, who's getting arrested but us, right?
Right.
So who's policing us but the Boston police? And, at the beginning, 100 years ago, when the police force was started, it was started as slave catchers.
Right. Right.
Hence to say, a whole bunch of us, black and brown people, have been caught and set on a chopping block in and out of these court systems with shackles on us.
Modern day plantations.
There it goes. So we know this type of conversation, this stuff has been going on before us. Before, Andrea is my mentor. She has mentors. Mentors have mentors, right? So we have people who, like Angela Davis, been talking this talk for a long time. Have we been listening? We're saying now we're carrying a torch and creating some solutions. We don't need the system. We're not system people. The system's not going to save us. Andrea says it all the time, right?
Right.
Let's talk about the Boston Police budget. When we talk about defunding, this type of language is going around saying we need to stop using that language because it's hurting us. We're saying until you understand what that means, you can't say it's hurting us. Now that everybody has their perspective or perception of what words or language or use means, we're saying if you know what this police budget is, $170 million, for what reason are you having that type of massive budget?
Right.
To hire more cops, to bring in more police cars, to hire cadets and give them salaries where they didn't have that before,
Right.
to have, cameras that you're not even using. Why? In overtime budget. And then let's talk about the whole police association who has a lot of power in this community.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about the Department of Corrections police budget. You almost have one correctional officer to one individual incarcerated.
Right.
For what reason are you having those type of massive budgets when there's a lack of investment and resources in the black and brown communities?
Right.
So how you weigh that?
Right.
$170 million on these budgets for policing, and you have no resources in the community. That says that's by design.
Right. It is by
So you could arrest and lock us up and keep making, labor funds off of our backs. So we say defund, take some of those, divest some of them funds out of those budgets and bring it and invest it into community resources that we need and deserve. We need school systems to be thriving like other white communities are thriving. Why are we taking away budgets out of the Boston public school systems, the form of art and music? We know art and music, gives us some developmental social skills. Why would you, it's a form of healing.
Right.
So you remove those type of elements, and what do we have in the school system? Who has an interest to go to school? And so we say defund some of those police budgets. Right. And give us some of those budgets and give it to the community leaders who know what to do in our community for our community. Right. Since they're not really willing to cooperate, we have the solution. As you can see, Kimia's house. Right. Kimia's house is full of resources. Yes. Our organizations are full of resources. Right. We have the solutions. Right. I'm a licensed clinician. I counsel men and women all the time coming out of prison. That's right. Stuff pops out of our head, like, go over here and do this. If they have someone that cares enough about them and you have the resources, how are they going to fail? And for our community to believe that we're saturated with programmers, we should be saturated with programs, specific need programs, because we're going to still have the lack of resources, and we're going to have the lack of growth in these communities. We're so indoctrinated to believe that a sex offender doesn't deserve any help, a criminal doesn't deserve any help, an inmate or ex-felon, all these derogatory statements. We don't use that language. We call them people. They're individuals formerly incarcerated that needs some resources and some love and nurturing like everybody else. And so that's the work that we're doing in this community. That's what's needed. That's why I speak at Harvard, Berkeley, Tufts. Whoever says let me speak, I'm not an academic inclined person.
Right.
And I'm not going to talk a language that I don't necessarily want to talk or understand the language. I just talk what's real and what my heart feels.
Right.
And we need what we need in this community, or else we're going to keep seeing and having the same results, expecting something different. You know, I get on some of these community meetings, Tawana, and it's heartbreaking. All we hear for the straight hour is Boston police reports. Somebody's shooting dope in somebody's backyard. Somebody's breaking in somebody's car. Somebody's trying to strangle somebody on Blue Hill Ave. Okay, well, let's fix that problem. Let's let us, who are the ones who are the experts, we stayed out there all them years getting high. We went in the prison system and came into the camaraderie and started really discussing how we had a vision of reimagining what our community should look like with real, natural, good resources.
Absolutely.
So let us lead that. Give us some of that budget.
Absolutely.
We're legit today. We have legitimate organizations that know how to lead the way and help people on Blue Hill Ave and any other avenue in this town. And stop shutting us out, because we're here to stay. This is our neighborhood too. We're not gentrifiers. We're not developers coming in trying to take anything from anybody. We're trying to give back wholeheartedly what was given to us as to how we came out of that dark place.
Absolutely. So you speak openly and candidly about ending mass incarceration. It's a big thing for you. I stand with you. But what would be the one thing that you would do to start the process to ending warehousing? Because this is warehousing. You know, I've been incarcerated as you have, you know that. But this is warehousing of our people.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the first step that you would take in order to end the mass incarceration for everybody?
Yeah, well, you know, that's a big task. And, you know, some people say to me, well, Stacey, if we end it, what are we going to do with the real mentally ill? And I'm like, you know, all of us have some mental illness, some form of something. There ain't nobody perfect, right? Even the most person who we look at that seems to be perfect, they got something going on inside. Everybody does, right? And so when you say the first step, here's the first step. We've been able to obtain a 6-bedroom residential property and develop it for a reentry program for women. Now, we want to replicate that all over.
Right.
But when you really get down to it, we have to continue having a new and creative dialogue, narratives, telling truth, speaking truth to power. If you hadn't been in prison, you shouldn't keep thinking that that's what the recourse is that we should be going toward a prison system. We should be really changing the narrative and say, listen, a person we know that goes to prison must have been in some distress, right? Isn't there some alternatives to that? We have the primary caretakers bill that Andrea and her team developed and got passed. That means take the power out of the prosecutor's hands and stop prosecuting everybody and anybody that looks like us because you think you're afraid of us. Right. What are you afraid of us for? We have some issues. We got some problems. Everybody has a severe problematic. We're not all sociopathic people walking the earth wanting to hurt people. Actually, there's a whole bunch of sociopathic people who don't feel anything and don't harm anybody. But if we continue to have the same dialogue of crime and punishment instead of transform and restorative justice, we're going to have the same results. And so we're saying, stop putting them in jail because they don't know how to advocate for themselves. Stop putting them in jail because they're in their emotional state. It's called your amygdala. It's part of the brain development. right? If your brain hasn't developed enough and matured in your frontal cortex, you can't make decisive decisions on your own. And you're working off in the back of your head, which is your emotional state, the amygdala. And so let's get it right. Let's stop these, primary care doctors with giving psych meds. They're not psychologists and psychiatrists. You have that mess down Mass Ave. You have the jail down there. They come out of jail. They go into probation, have to take a urine. Then they go in there because we have clinics, methadone clinics, Suboxone clinics in the prison. Now you got them, I'm for harm reduction, so I worked in a methadone clinic. It's effective medicine if you have effective counseling. But if you have that mess that they created down there with the jail, probation, urine, methadone clinic, Boston City Hospital, shelters, giving them psych meds, Klonopins, and methadone, it doesn't work. Somebody got us changed. And this is why we have this type of in and out of recidivism rate. If you're going in the South Bay, you're being, assaulted in there as well. There's many records up there about assaults, right? That community jail need to be shut down. If you're doing 2.5 years and under, how much of a safety risk are you really to the public? Right? You could have an alternative. Set up a whole bunch of these community houses and we'll take care of them. Trust me. Gross says it all the time. Let them out and let them in the neighborhood and y'all take care of them. Yeah, damn right. Send them home to me. I'll take care of them because I'm not scared of our own people. Are you serious? Send them into this type of community and we'll give them all the love and nurturing and direction they need and deserve.
Because Stacy, let's be honest, maybe that's all they need because they didn't get it growing up. And so
Thank you.
Part of the problem to begin with. And I think that a lot of times people want to belong to something even if it's destructive. And
we all just want a place of belonging, right?
Right. And let me be clear. I don't condone anything that will harm another person, but more often than not, the people in jails and prisons harm themselves before they harm anybody else. And they even get locked up for that. Most drug addicts, they're trying to numb some type of pain. So they harm themselves first. And in return, they go out, they may take the drugs out. I was just going to ask you about Mass Ave and what you thought about that. So it's funny that you answered the question for me. But what do you think about the governor's stance on Mass Ave? Because, Stacey, honestly, I pass by there more often than not, and I'm crying because I'm so sad to see people shooting up, using drugs. And I watched the Boston police and the state police just sitting in their vehicles, watching people bobbing and weaving out of traffic, almost getting hit by cars. What do you think about the governor's stance on how he's decided to deal with this during a pandemic and an epidemic?
Well, where's the solution? They put a lot of money into treatment, right? You can't force somebody. I personally, as a counselor, as a substance abuse counselor, I think that it's a mental health illness. I think that we need to take it out of the health care and put it into mental health care and maybe hold somebody for 90 days until we get some clarity. If you're not able to handle yourself for that message down there, you opened up Taunton State Hospital and made it a treatment facility. Hold them up to 90 days. 72 hours is not enough. That gives someone enough time to say, this what's called the stages of change. Right? It's in the pre-contemplated state. You always go back and forth from pre-contemplation to contemplation to preparation to anybody out there knows that's part of my favorite counseling of group therapy. You got to know yourself, but you need some clarity to get it, right? So I don't know. The governor has his own team. He's listening to the medical team. I think there's a big disconnect with the Boston Department of Public Health and the Department of Mental Health. What the hell are they separate for? It's a public health issue, but it's a mental health issue. So take it out of the health medical department and put it into the mental health department and make the team effective. Some of us need chemical imbalance. We have chemical imbalances, especially if you're drug addicted, right? Or if you're alcohol addicted. You're numbing for reasons, but you can't control it by giving them a double med, psych med. It doesn't give them enough clarity. So as to why you see down there. So, I spoke about this a few times and hope that the governor can hear that your team needs to be kind of revised. I'm not a reformist. I don't say reform anything. You got to revise it or dismantle it, period. If it ain't working, What do you keep reforming it for? It didn't work from your reform the last time. So maybe you need to bring it back to the table. Open up Long Island again.
Well, see,
Did,
you
did
speak
that help that system down there? I
right,
don't know.
but you talk about opening up Long Island. So you know that I used to live in Quincy, and I remember the mayor over there saying, like, there were so many people that were against it, that were against opening up Long Island, that were against opening up that bridge again. To kind of, to me, that bridge represented something more than just a bridge for people to get over to get to the program. It was a bridge to healing. Some people who
It's a
healed
bridge to healing.
got their recovery there. That's where people
Right.
started their journey to recovery. And for the community that complains about the drug addicts being in Quincy Center or being down at Wollaston Beach, the community, the same community that complains about these things. See, when Black people do this, it's called, they're ready to lock us up. But when white people
Silence.
do it, it's called an epidemic. It's been
Right.
an epidemic when we were doing it, when crack came on the scene and started taking mothers away from their children and fathers away from their children. That's when it was an epidemic. But no one called it that because we were so busy looking at the fact that since it hadn't touched, I saw a Black girl in Framingham, and I think that you may know her. I can't think of her name right now. She was doing 7 years, Cynthia Wigfall. 5 to 7. She was a drug addict, but she had a 5 to 7 year sentence for having a $50 rock of crack cocaine. Now, how in the world is that? How does that work? It was for her. It was for
I
personal.
mean, is that productive?
It,
Sentencing her? What did that do for her?
it didn't do anything for her,
It doesn't do anything for anybody.
and it
Locking
wasn't
them
for
out.
right. It wasn't
It's
for personal.
punitive. It's a punishing system. There's no, you can't get any services. As to why we need to talk about not building any new prisons. They're talking about building $50 million for a women's facility when we have a lower, less, one of the less populations in the United States of imprisonment in Massachusetts.
Absolutely.
Why would the governor take $50 million and build a new prison for women when we have 54 lifers and half of them can come home? And the other half should be coming home on clemency because they haven't done any clemency. But let me just correct you on a couple of things, to one, if I may.
Please do.
We're addicted people. We're people with addictive behaviors. We're not drug
Absolutely.
addicts. We're not.
Absolutely.
David Ellis is a deceased male now who did many years in the prison in New York. And then he came out and became a professor. He might even have had a PhD in psychology. But what he wrote was significant. He wrote what's called an open letter of language. If we continue to allow the system and people that don't understand, people are afraid of what they don't know.
Absolutely.
And that's why we have so much opposition with Quincy and Roxbury and Boston. They're afraid of what they don't know. And we've been indoctrinated in understanding and believing in the police system because that's all we hear all day long.
Right.
It's on the news, it's on TV. So David Ellis says that we are people. And if we continue to allow the system to press upon us these type of derogatory names, that's how we're going to view ourselves, and that's how we're going to allow the community to view us. And we can't grow and advance and thrive that way. So we aren't drug addicts. We're not, that ain't methadone mile. That is a street of Mass Ave distress. And we're not felons and inmates and we're people. Some of us are incarcerated people. Some of us are addicted people. Some of us have addictive behaviors. And some of us are just regular, formerly incarcerated people that have led these processes and are changing what the community should look like. We don't know what different looks like. And we need to start really leaning toward that, as again, Andrea James says it all the time.
Absolutely.
You need to have what does different look like?
Absolutely. And I think that, sometimes when Black and brown people, when we get a pushback, we don't always resist. We go away. And that's why we're not educated enough because sometimes we don't stand still. We don't stand in the thick of it, no matter what people say. They say you are what you answer to. Well, I'm tired of being a convicted felon. I'm tired of my
Thank
rights
you.
speaking to who you believe that I am, as opposed to who I am now. If I got on a train and sat next to you, you would never know that I had served time in prison. right? You
Yeah.
would have never known that
Yeah.
unless I said something to you. But if a homeless person gets on the train, you immediately put your bag down and you don't want them to sit next to you. When I'm the person that probably could steal your whole identity if that's what I chose to do. See, again, society doesn't really educate themselves enough to see things, not just see things, but to hear things. We're so busy trying to talk or over talk somebody. Like Christian White has this podcast, Listening to Learn. That is one of the truest statements. We're not just listening because we're waiting to respond. We need to learn something because we're very uneducated when it comes to incarcerated women and men, what happens in prison, who are the people in prison, what they look like, where they come from, things that have happened to them. We know nothing, but we study, talk about it, and impose these laws or build these laws or structure these laws upon what we think and not what we know. And this is why the system is designed for us to fail over and over and over again.
That's right. I appreciate you saying that. That just reminds me to say, let's start saying their names. Like, let's start talking about Angie Jefferson. Let's talk about Raymond Gaines.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Angie Jefferson serving a natural life sentence in her 29th year, raising her daughter and her two sons who
And
never got arrested
right,
and never seen the justice system, the criminal
right,
justice
right,
system.
right. And the
That,
one, right. And
and to say that she's a model individual in the prison system. Why couldn't she come home now? Isn't she been punished enough for her crime?
right,
She's also survived and punished. She also was protecting herself and out of an emotional state after having so much death in her family. Her father was murdered.
right,
Her
right,
daughter's father was murdered.
right,
She comes out of Ruggles Project and sees so much murder, she ends up stabbing somebody and he was murdered.
right.
Why are we sentencing somebody like that? And why, if you have sentenced and in her 29th going on 30 years now, why isn't that enough time for someone to come home? Why isn't Governor Baker signing some of these clemencies and looking at people to see that them as human beings that they've done enough work? She's in her graduate school in the prison now. She's done enough work for herself to say that she deserves to come home to her granddaughter,
And
right?
it's funny that you say that, Stacey, because I actually was in BU with Angie, and she got her GED while she was in
I mean,
Franklin.
she raised me. She's one hell of a woman,
And
man.
she's turned her whole life around. But again, people, when you see, I think sentencing should be revisited. If you're going to hand down a sentence like that, and they say that there's no death sentence, that's a death sentence.
That's a death, especially in COVID.
Natural life is a death sentence.
Yeah.
You're not sending them to the electric chair. You're not pushing poison in them to make them die early, but they still die in jail.
And and I appreciate, and I'm probably never, I kick myself in the butt for saying it all the time, but, I love Rachel Rollins as a DA. Like, for real talk. Not because I know her sister or her mother, is because she understands. She gets it. She tells her own story about her brothers being incarcerated and addicted. She tells her own life story of the struggle she went through as, having a white father and a black mother. All the stuff. She's a real individual that gets it. She comes from the community. And she's about changing life, the LWAP centers.
Absolutely.
She understands the brain development.
And this is the reason why so for everybody, I also am going to be interviewing Rachel Rollins on Thursday at 4 p.m. So you can join me. Again,
I would definitely be there. I love listening to her talk.
you want to normalize people. You want to make people familiar. I think the biggest problem that community and people in the community and Black and brown people, we need to familiarize ourselves with people who are in authority that we can go to and say, hey, listen, this isn't working for us, and how can you help us change this?
That's right.
That it doesn't happen because we're so afraid of the system and how it views us and what it'll do to us if we do the wrong thing or if we say the wrong thing. And so I think that the reason for me wanting her on this platform is to let people know that she's human first, and she just happens to be a government official who holds some type of authority. But trust and believe me, people, anybody who doesn't know DA Rollins, she doesn't play. She wants people in the community to reach out to her, because when she didn't get a message from me, she was highly upset. She feels like she should be accessible to everybody in the community to help them to get through certain things. So again, I've been incarcerated. I've been prosecuted by Suffolk County DA's office, her office. But in the end, we have to say, when we have people like that in position, we need to utilize them as much as possible in order to get to the
Right. I mean, if she's talking about connecting with community organizations, community efforts, she says it all the time. She's like, stop committing these dumbass crimes. You won't have to get prosecuted. Stop carrying a gun and shooting people, and I won't have to put you in jail.
right,
Like, come and talk to me.
right,
Let's get you some resources and some help. Who does that as a DA? We never had that before. This is the progressive DA. And we need to support her with that.
right, right. And I believe
You know what I mean?
I believe that she takes the stance of, I'm not going to back down from anything. If I said it, if I said Black Lives Matter, it matters. No,
It matters. That's
I
right.
won't take it off my Twitter account. No, I won't take it off my Instagram. I said it and I stand on it. And
That's right.
Mayor Marty Walsh and Governor Baker, if you don't like it, then use your own platform to say whatever you want to say. But this is what I'm
That's
going to say. And
That's
this is the reason why I think I hold her in high regards, because sometimes I don't agree with some of the things that are happening in the community. And sometimes I'm like, I don't think she did enough. But at the end of the day, she doesn't back down from anything, and she is for us. And I think,
Well, she's one person
Right.
overseeing 300 or 400 staff members all the way to Chelsea. I mean, she has different, zones that she has to oversee, right? So, to be able to build a relationship in that office, which has been wonderful for us because we fight on behalf of incarcerated people with wrongful convictions, with, LWOP, with parole hearings. We all counsel through participatory defense organizing, through Families for Justice's Healing. We counsel these men and women who are facing the parole, and we prepare them to be able to hold accountability. Not so much hold them accountable, but can they hold themselves accountable for the harm that they've caused? But how do we talk about the harm that was caused to them in a healing motion first, so then they can see that they have caused great harm because hurt people, right? And so Rachel's all on board. Like, I need to say shout out to Raymond Gaines, who's about to come home after 46 years of being wrongfully convicted. Finally, the DA's office, who she kept her promise with, creating the conviction integrity unit, was able to review these type of post convictions and look at his case and say, wow, there's a smoking gun here. They've held exculpatory evidence from him for the past 28 years.
right,
Well, we've been able to break that wide open and reach that office and say, listen, you have to look at this case. CPCS, the Committee for Public Services, for Public Counsel, hired an attorney for Raymond, and he saw it. We did a timeline. We showed it to him. We showed it to the DA's office. They're in prayer, hoping that they're not opposing his sentence. His case is going into court within the next 2 weeks for a stay of execution. He's gonna come home after 46 years.
wow. And that's a long,
He's coming home.
that's a long time to serve for something that you didn't do. And again, I am
Went in at 18.
right, and I am for anybody, who's listening to the show or who listens to my shows. The reason why I built this platform, first of all, nobody really knows that I'm shy, so I don't really like a lot of people listening to me. But I felt like, as a formerly incarcerated woman, I needed to put this out there so that people can really understand that we need to be more active in the community in order for things to really change. We can't say that Black Lives Matter if, as Black people, we're not going to stand up in the community and start pushing back against these people.
That's it.
Because
I mean, we've had the Boston Police again. We started this conversation by talking about the history of Boston Police. The
Right.
Boston Police Department have been brutalized in our community for decades. As to why you see all these black men like Sean Ellis, like Fred, I can't think of his last name, but people like Arnie King, over excessive,
right,
sentencing. And some of them, like Clay, I think it's Williams, I'm not sure, Frederick Clay, or Clay Fredericks,
right,
who just won a few $1 million for his wrongful conviction. And you got Sean Ellis, knowing that was a hit on that Boston police officer, and you convicted that young man for 21 years and tore his family and community apart for that. And then you have Raymond Gaines, that had the same police officer of Peter O'Malley, who was connected to the Charles Stewart case in '86, about to be prosecuted for 9 misconduct charges in 96 by the federal government. That case went away. And he's the same officer 20 years prior that arrested Raymond and framed him for a murder that he didn't commit.
And then
This is what's happening, and this is all unfolding because we have these progressive DAs and the system that is starting to, the judges are saying, wait a minute,
right,
Black Lives Matter do matter.
right, right.
Y'all tore up our community enough, and we're saying we're going to rebuild our own community with you or without you, but we hope that you come aboard
Hey now.
because we need this. We need you to support us. We don't need the system, but we're going to do it with you or without you.
Okay.
Because I'm not getting high no more. I'm in my right sane mind. Have been. I came home 2010 March. We've acquired this property March 2020. That doesn't happen by any circumstance or coincidences. That's all universal. So without you or with you, we're going to change our community around.
Absolutely. So before we end the segment, why don't you just tell us how we can get, to support Kimya's House, to support New Beginnings. I've always been a big fan of supporting people in the community, whether it's I was on your Zoom call the other day, and I'm glad that I hopped on with the doctor talking about the COVID vaccine and how
Yep.
it affects the people that are incarcerated. And that actually is something that people need to be aware of, that everyone should have been on that call who could listen, who actually has someone that's incarcerated. People are scared to take the vaccine, especially Black people in the community.
Right.
So this was a good way. Again, we
Yeah.
need to be educated. And if we're educated, become more educated as to what is happening in our community. So how can we support Kimya's House and support New Beginnings? Whether it's
So you can come on. You could come on our website. We have 3 different. We really always need general support funds. We do fundraising. We have PayPal. We have a GoFund. We've had a GoFund page since we started 2016. We started with, getting donations for clothing and shoe drives. That's how we started raising our funds through GoFund. So we still have that GoFund page. And then we have Act Blue for the business people who want to contribute. So you can go on our website.
So if could you send me the link for the GoFundMe so that I can post it on the Not Your Normal Conversation, on my Not Your Normal Conversation page, so that people can, even if it's $1, if you
$1 helps.
people, that's $100.
That's right. And even if you want to be a $5 monthly donor, we look for monthly donors all the time. So
I just want us to support you. I appreciate you. I love you, Stacy.
I love you too.
For all of the work that you do in the community, for the times that you've tried to help me personally, the times that you've helped other people, that you continue to stay involved with the women, that you haven't just left them behind at MCI Framingham.
I made a promise. I told them I was going to come out and do something different, and I stuck with it for 10 years, and here we are, ready to bring them home.
Right. So I pray that you continue to stay strong and that more people unite with you so that you can keep on doing what you're doing. Continue to educate the community. If there's anything I could ever do to help, I'm there. I'm for it. All for
Thank you.
I do push back. I think that you know that already. Nobody's scared of the law. Obviously, I've been in jail too many times. But that's
Right.
More importantly, I'm not afraid to fight for what's right for a change as opposed to.
Yeah, and let me just say this, because my puppy's got to go to the bathroom. Let me just say this. When we talk about defund and the DOC, we don't mean lose jobs. We don't want them to lose their jobs.
Right.
We want them to find other jobs, other psychological jobs. Like, go get educated in the psych world. Understand what we go through in this community. But you cannot keep taking us and building new prisons and kidnapping us and putting us in a cage. Animals don't even belong in cages.
So
We shouldn't be in cages.
exactly.
I'm not free. We say it all the time. My sister Taz, Justine Moore, we call her Taz. She's out of New York with the National Council. She says it. I'm not free until they're all free. And so I use that all the time. I'm not free. I can't be free. I can't sleep at night knowing that one of my sisters might be in one of those chairs strapped because she don't know how to handle her emotions for the day. And you're going to strap her to a chair and muzzle her. That's unacceptable. That's degrading, disrespectful, it's hurtful, and it's challenging to anybody sitting in that type of system because you're afraid of them spitting on you because you don't know how to say, let's have a conversation.
I have have to say this before we end, and since you spoke on it, it's especially harmful to somebody, which is 80% of the population in Framingham, who've been molested or raped, to strip
Thank
them
you.
naked and put them in a chair and have maybe a male officer watching them while they have their
That's
clothes
right.
on. So yes,
It's called adrenaline. Is
it
your adrenaline state can go into your you know different processes. Your adrenaline can go right to your pituitary gland, and you could have any type of an eruption in your brain. You could have an aneurysm. You could have a stroke because you don't know how to handle your emotions. All kind of stuff is harmful.
so
Prisons are harmful, and you should not continue to build them just for our people.
that's right.
We're not going to let you do it. And we're going to keep building these houses and educate our people in our community and give them the resources and reimagine what our community looks like that they need and deserve.
Well, not your normal conversation. We'd like to invite you back in a couple of months so you can tell us how Kemia's house is kicking off. You know, I said I would come in and help you if you need my assistance with anything. I'm there.
We see the zoning board for approval of opening tomorrow, so send us out a prayer. Call the zoning board if you believe that we should be doing these type of things in our community. They're saying we're saturated with programming. We need to be saturated with programs, but the right programs. We need to regulate some of the sober housing programs that are out here. We need that more than we need somebody in a back alley shooting dope that could potentially cause himself to die, him or her to die.
This is Stacey Borden. Please support her cause. Kemia's House, New Beginnings. Stacey,
New Beginners Reentry Services Incorporated.
that's right. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of months.
you.
You're going to tell me how this is all going. I will post on my Not Your Normal Conversation page the GoFundMe for Kemia's House. We'd love to support.
It's right on my website, www.newbeginnersreentryservices.org.
Thank you, Stacey. Everybody,
Thank
you.
you.
For Not Your Normal Conversation. We love you. Thank
I
you
love
for
you.
listening, and have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Tawana.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I